that's by way of housekeeping. We also apologize, we are running behind time, but we hope we will make up. Chairperson of Council, Professor Thembeka Ngcukaitobi, outgoing National Lotteries Commission Board Chairperson, Professor Barney Pityana, if I repeat my protocol, it's because of that disturbance. Incoming NLC Board Chairperson, Mr. Thembinkosi Bonakele, Walter Sisulu Chancellor and Principal, Professor Thandi Mgwebi, NLC Commissioner, Ms. Jody Scholz, NLC Board Member, Ms. Beryl Ferguson, Archbishop Sithembele Sipuka, Executive Management of Walter Sisulu, NLC Board Members, and at this stage I will ask Utatu Chawe to come and help us ukukahlela. Mr. Patko Mafani, please.
Izawucela odada basukume kuzawukhahlela odada bodwa sikhahlela umzukulwana kaSandile ukumkani uJongxolo kazana esizwe kabazi indlovu kavelile Sandile unyana kamaxhoba yakhawuleza nonoloyiso. Sizawukhahlela ke boba wonke izandla zombini amatyeli amathathu. Avululwandle. 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 Singahlala phansi ke ikomkhulu lindulule abantwana begazi Nkosi Makinana noChawe iChawe lamaChawe the Prince Cibi balapha nabo namhlanje ntwana omhle camakho.
You will forgive me, I omitted the acting executive mayor, Noma Africa Maxongo. We had to keep updating our protocol as participants became available. So let me continue then and say, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a good afternoon to you all. Molweni. There are occasions in the life of a nation when we gather not merely to mark the passage of time, but to honor a life whose influence continues to shape the moral and intellectual landscape of our society. And today, it is one such occasion. It is both a singular honor and a profound privilege to direct the program for this public lecture in honor of Professor N.Barney, Pityana, a distinguished son of South Africa whose life has been devoted to the pursuit of justice, intellectual excellence, ethical leadership, and the advancement of human dignity. Few individuals have shaped our democratic and academic landscape with such consistency, courage, and moral conviction. And it is therefore fitting that we gather today to celebrate a life of uncommon service. On behalf of University Walter Sisulu and the National Lotteries Commission, I extend to each and every one of you a warm Eastern Cape welcome. We are honored by your presence here this afternoon and equally delighted to welcome those joining us via our live stream from across South Africa and beyond. This, ladies and gentlemen, is not an ordinary lecture. It is a rare and significant gathering of some of South Africa's most distinguished minds and leaders in government, higher education, the judiciary, the church, traditional leadership, civil society, philanthropy, business, and community development. Under one roof, we are privileged to welcome leaders who, through their collective wisdom, have shaped South Africa's democratic journey. Such a convergence of minds reminds us that while institutions often work in parallel, there are moments when they come together to pursue a noble and shared vision. The gathering of these esteemed leaders is a tribute to the remarkable stature of Professor Barney Pityana. Today's gathering, therefore, stands as a fitting acknowledgement of a life dedicated to enlarging the possibilities of freedom and strengthening the institutions upon which the country's constitutional democracy depends. The theme that brings us together this afternoon, which is improving quality of life for all, unlocking the potential of every person through equity and opportunity, could scarcely be timelier. It invites us to imagine a South Africa where opportunity is not the privilege of a fortunate few, but the birthright of every citizen, where talent is nurtured where it is found, where justice is measured not only by the laws we enact, but by the lives we transform. It reminds us that a nation's greatest wealth lies not beneath its soil or within its markets, but within the limitless potential of its people when dignity, equity, and opportunity walk hand in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my great pleasure to invite the Vice Chancellor and Principal of University Walter Sisulu, Professor Thandi Mgwebi, to deliver the official welcome address. Professor Mgwebi, the podium is yours.
Thank you, Program Director. So I'm going to request that I write on the protocol that has already been said by the Program Director to all our distinguished guests. And most particularly, I want to mention and single out our distinguished guest of honor, Prof.N.Barney Pityana, Umpehle, Unkomozi Bomvu. Ndithi, welcome to Walter Sisulu. Esteemed colleagues from universities and partner institutions that may be watching us online, it will be career limiting if I don't mention the members of council and senate, government representatives, students, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon. It's a really a privilege for me to welcome you all to our university for this special occasion. I call it the Prof.N.Barney Pityana Lecture and Farewell. I see it as an occasion of reflection, of gratitude and celebration. We are here not only to hear insights aligned with one of South Africa's foremost public intellectuals, but also to honor a remarkable life dedicated to justice, scholarship, leadership, and service. Professor Pityana, when I was preparing for these short welcome remarks, so I went to AI and I said, what do you know about Professor Pityana? And it came up with a whole list. And I said, what are the bad things you know about Professor Pityana? I'm not going to tell you what it said. Professor Pityana occupies a unique place in our nation's history. He helped shape the generation that refused to accept oppression as destiny. Of course, he did this alongside other visionaries, affirming dignity, agency, and humanity of Black South Africans, reminding us that true liberation begins with the liberation of the mind. His contribution, however, did not end with the struggle for democracy. Throughout his distinguished career, you have remained an unwavering advocate for constitutionalism, for ethical leadership, for human rights, and transformative power of higher education. Whether it is a scholar, a theologian, a lawyer, public servant, or vice chancellor, he has consistently challenged institutions to become better versions of themselves and to serve society with integrity and courage. Professor Pityana may not know this. When I was in Pretoria, he was my dean at the cathedral. And I must say the only reason I went to his classes was not only because I really wanted to go to church, but it's how he taught. It was quite inviting in how he explains spirituality. His legacy reminds us that universities are not merely places where knowledge is transmitted. They are places where societies imagine their futures, confront injustice, and cultivate critical thought, and prepare leaders who will shape generations yet to come. For Walter Sisulu, this lecture carries particular significance. Our institution bears the name of one of South Africa's greatest champions of human dignity and public service. It is therefore fitting that we gather under the banner of another distinguished son of our country, whose life's work has embodied those same enduring values of justice, courage, intellectual freedom, and ethical leadership. We know that retirement for scholars of his caliber is seldom the end of their contribution. So we're still going to use your brains, Professor Pityana. This marks the beginning of another chapter, yet again, of mentorship, reflection, writing, and continued influence. On behalf of Council, Senate, management, staff, students, and the broader Walter Sisulu community, we thank you. Thank you for reminding us that leadership is ultimately a moral calling. And thank you for understanding that scholarship must always remain connected to justice. And thank you for showing that institutions matter only when they serve people with integrity, courage, and compassion. You have inspired us all. And to all our guests, thank you for honoring us with your presence this evening. Your attendance reflects the profound respect that Professor Pityana commands across our country and internationally. And for the NLC, thank you for partnering with us. And thank you for choosing us to be the place for this lecture. May it stimulate thoughtful dialogue and inspire critical reflection. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to University Walter Sisulu and to the Prof.N.Barney Pityana lecture and farewell. Thank you.
Thank you, VC, for that welcome. And swiftly moving on, may I ask Ms. Jody Scholz to give us the purpose of the day, please.
Program Director, Chancellor Gobodo, Chairperson of the Walter Sisulu University Council, Prof.N.Barney, Toby. Apologies, I practiced, I really did. I really hope so. I really hope so. VC and Principal, Prof. Mkwebi, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Teaching and Learning, Prof. Margaret Linnington, Deputy Minister, Trade, Industry and Competition, Mr. Zuko Godlimpi, Chairperson of Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Trade, Industry and Competition, Mr. Mzwandile Masina, Eastern Cape Acting Premier, Eastern Cape MEC for Sport, Recreation, Arts, Culture, the Catholic Archbishop of Cape Town and President of the SA Council of Churches, Archbishop Sepuka, outgoing Chairperson of the National Lotteries Board, Professor Barney Pityana, incoming Chairperson of the NLC Board, Mr. Tembikosi Bonakele, board members present, NLC Exco and officials present. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really honored to be part of this very important occasion. Earlier this week, the National Lotteries Commission signed a memorandum of understanding with the Gaming Board of Tanzania. And Ms. Tinswala Nkuna shared a beautiful Ghanaian story, a tradition with us, that when you're doing the purpose of the day, it's always good to reinforce why we are here. Because anything could have happened from the room where we're coming from to here. And so it is my privilege to share with you why we are here this afternoon. Let me first start by conveying our gratitude as the National Lotteries Commission to the leadership of the Walter Sisulu University for partnering with us on this very important event. We do not take this for granted, and we are very grateful for the leadership of the university and officials in making this a reality. Program Director, we are gathered here today for a public lecture and to honor a leader in our society, a theologian, a human rights lawyer, an academic who has contributed immensely to South Africa and served to the best of his ability. His sacrifices for the betterment of our society and for humankind in general cannot be taken for granted and are worth celebrating. Today, the National Lotteries Commission and the Walter Sisulu University are hosting this public lecture under the theme, Improving Quality of Life for All, Unlocking the Potential of Every Person Through Equality and Opportunity. This theme encompasses Prof. Pityana's lifelong commitment and effort to improve the quality of life for the less fortunate in our society and giving them an opportunity to realize their God-given potential. For me, Prof. Pityana's leadership is one of love. This is not something that we speak about in universities, we speak about in business books. But it's a deep, deep love for his fellow human being, South Africans, love for the work that he was called to do, and love for upholding our constitutional values. So as the NLC, we felt it very befitting to host this public lecture at this university. Now, Program Director, I have a long, long, long list of accolades, where Prof worked, where he studied, where he contributed, what he did. And I'm going to just say that Prof. Pityana is an exponent of Black theology. He has served in numerous roles. And the one that matters most to me is that he was appointed as the chairperson of the National Lotteries Commission in September 2022. So everything else was very, very important, but this one, this particular one, was absolutely critical. Prof. Pityana, the board under your leadership adopted a turnaround strategy anchored on 3 pillars: returning the NLC to its core mandate of regulation and grant funding, reinstating our credibility, restoring governance, and building operational excellence. Prof. Pityana was not new to the lottery industry, as he served as the founding independent non-executive chairperson of Utingo, the first licensed lottery operator in the democratic South Africa. As the NLC, we believe that when we leave here, based on the discussions and the thought leadership we'll hear today, that we would have been inspired to do more. And that's one of the things that Prof is always asking us. How can we do this differently? How can we, in our individual roles and capacities, actually go out there and make a difference? How can we give agency to those who have no voice? And so today we'll get some new ideas on how best we can use the resources that we have to build thriving communities in this country. I feel honored to have served as a commissioner of the NLC under his leadership. He is principled and an outstanding leader. He does get grumpy, though, sometimes when things are not going according to, how he knows they should be, and then you get called in. But Prof, it's been an absolute privilege and a pleasure. So on behalf of the NLC community, we want to express our deep appreciation for everything that you've done, for the Commission, for your family who has supported. I've heard, Ma, you know us all by name. Because I'm sure that at some point, Chair, after he's put down the phone with me, says, this Jody, she's really not doing what she should be doing. So she said today, I know all the names. So thank you for your legacy of love and for sharing Prof with us. It hasn't been easy. Chair has had to get up some mornings for interviews at 5:30. He's there. That can only happen when you have a partner who's willing to say, babe, you need to get up. You've got an interview, and so we really do thank you and the family for bearing with us. We wish you well. We wish you well. God bless you and all the members of your family. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scholes. If this were a song, ladies and gentlemen, I would say we are getting closer to the chorus. So to take us there, can I please ask Ms. Beryl Ferguson to introduce the guest speaker?
This is a problem when you have a height deficiency. So, good afternoon, everybody. Molweni, goeiemiddag. I stand on the protocol that was mentioned before, because Jody, I can't top that. I really can't. I'm just here. I've got a simple job. My job is to introduce our guest speaker. I met him very briefly, but what an amazing person. Thank you, Archbishop, for being so gracious and for smiling as if you knew me for a very long time. When we leave here, I would have known you for a very long time. So I'm introducing the Archbishop Sitembele Sipoka. The Archbishop is a respected Catholic leader, theologian, and advocate of social justice. He currently serves as the Catholic Archbishop of Cape Town and President of the South African Council of Churches. He is widely recognized for his leadership on issues of justice, of democracy, ethical governance, and ecumenical cooperation. Born in Intutwa and raised in Butterworth, right here in the Eastern Cape, Archbishop Sipoka was ordained as a Catholic priest in 1988. And that was after he completed his theological studies in South Africa. He later obtained a master's degree in theology from the Pontifical, and I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Ubunania. I thought it was a South African word, but it's actually an Italian word. University in Rome, and of course he got his doctorate in systematic theology from the University of South Africa. His ministry has combined pastoral leadership, academic scholarship, and public engagement. He served as the rector of St. John's Vianney Seminary before being appointed Bishop of Mthatha in 2008. He focused on evangelization, education, leadership development, and the Church's response to poverty and social challenges. Archbishop Sipoka has held several influential leadership positions within the Catholic Church in Southern Africa and across the continent, including President of the South African Catholic Bishops' Conference from 2019 to 2024, the Vice President of the Symposium of Episcopal Conference of Africa and Madagascar, and then in 2024, he became the first Catholic to be elected President of the South African Council of Churches. Prof. Pityana, he took it away from the Anglican Church. And this reflects his commitment to fostering unity, collaboration among the Christian denominations, a prominent public voice on governance, corruption, social equality, peace building, and interreligious dialogue. Archbishop was appointed by the Pope Leo XIV as Archbishop of Cape Town in 2026. He continues to champion a church that is inclusive, outward-looking, and attentive to the needs of the poor, the migrants, the marginalized communities, while working closely with faith leaders to address South Africa's social and political challenges. Let us put our hands together and welcome Archbishop Sipoka.
Ndivumeleni ndicangathe emanyathelweni abo sele bewenziwa umsebenzi wabo into yokuba babulise bahloniphe iindwalutho ezilapha. Ndicela nje ukushwankathela ngokukhahlela kumkani avula ulwandle. Let me begin by making a little confession. When I was first approached to take part in this celebration honoring Professor Pityana, an event convened under the auspices of the National Lotteries Commission, I had a crisis of conscience. A bishop standing on a platform associated with lottery, I wondered if this would not look like an endorsement of gambling. And I struggled with that, but that concern was chased away by two memories. The first was of the many raffles we ran in our own parishes. The tickets that we sell after Mass, prizes drawn on the annual fete, all in the service of repairing a roof or running a soup kitchen to feed the hungry. We have never thought of these as gambling. We have thought of them as neighbors pooling small chances for a common good. The second memory was even more concrete in relation to National Lottery. In the Diocese of Mthatha, where I served before going to Cape Town, our Catholic Development Center, a place that trains young people in skills and supported development projects in some of the poorest wards of the Eastern Cape, at various points was a beneficiary of Lotto funding. And so once those two memories surfaced, my conscience suddenly found peace. I understood that this is not an occasion built on chance for chance's sake, but an occasion built on chance redirected, resources gathered widely and returned narrowly to the very people and causes that need them most. And so, brothers and sisters, I stand here this afternoon with an easy conscience and even a measure of gratitude, because Lotto, as my memory helped me to understand, is about the use of public mechanism to support the common good. That question of how resources are gathered and used is actually at the heart of our theme this afternoon: improving quality of life for all and unlocking the potential of every person through equity and opportunity. It is also at the heart of the man we honor, Prof.N.Barney, Pityana, to whom I now turn to explore his relevance to our challenges today. To speak of Professor Barney Pityana is to speak of a life woven from 4 strong strands. The first strand is Black consciousness. As one of the founding members of the South African Students' Organization and an important figure in the Black consciousness movement alongside Steve Biko, he helped articulate a response to a very particular kind of violence, the violence that tells a people again and again that they are inferior. Black consciousness answered that not only with political resistance, but with a spiritual and intellectual reawakening. It said, before a people can be free in law, they must first begin to see themselves as free in mind and in soul. In his own reflection on that movement, Professor Pityana described Black consciousness as an intellectual search for truth and a challenge to the false claims that kept Black people unfree, an insistence that the oppressed must give themselves the freedom to rebel against oppression and to free their own thinking enough to imagine another possibility. Oppression, he reminded us, works not only through laws and guns, but through ideas that enter the mind and make injustice seem natural. Liberation must therefore be both external and internal. It must remove unjust structures and also restore self-belief. That is the first strand. The second strand is faith and priesthood. His move into priestly and theological work did not take him away from the struggle for dignity. It carried that struggle into another language, but saying the same thing about dignity. In that work too, the central conviction remained the same. Faith cannot be faithful if it is detached from the suffering of the oppressed. Christianity does not give us permission to look away from injustice. It calls us to stand with those who bear its weight. The third strand is university leadership. During his time at UNISA, open and distance learning was not treated as a second-rate form of education, but as a serious means of widening access to those excluded by apartheid, poverty, geography, and social history. That is a very concrete form of equity. It says that a domestic worker's child in a rural village, a working adult in a township, a person whose life cannot fit traditional campus schedule, all deserve a real chance to learn. Opportunity must be designed, not merely hoped for. And the fourth strand is public service and development work, including his involvement in the lottery space. Here the question is, what happens after we have good ideas and just laws? How are resources gathered, distributed, and used so that communities actually concretely benefit? In this strand, Pityana's concern for justice becomes very special, a matter of mechanism, institutions, and funding flows that can widen opportunity in ordinary life. So these four strands, Black consciousness, priesthood, university leadership, and development work, are not separate stories. They are four verses of the same song, rhyming harmoniously in a single life. And today I want to suggest that they also form a lens through which we can read our present situation in South Africa. For if we are honest, our country is facing not only a crisis of economics and politics, but a crisis of consciousness, a crisis of faith and moral courage, a crisis of education, and a crisis of development and solidarity. In each of these areas, Pityana's life has something to say to us. Let me begin then with the first strand, Black consciousness, which speaks directly to a problem we see more and more, the problem of dependency and loss of agency. We know the material realities of our country. Unemployment remains painfully high, poverty persists. Many families survive because of social grants, without which hunger and desperation would be far worse. Grants are necessary. They are a lifeline, and it is good that we have them. But not seen for what they are, which is means towards self-independence, they can be a hindrance to self-development and realization of a potential when they are seen as end in themselves. At a development gathering organized by the RAK Church in Amtata about 3 or 4 years ago, Professor Bonang-Mohale, I was under the impression that he would be here. He's not here. He's coming. Okay. Tell him I mentioned his name. At that gathering organized by RAK Church in Amtata about 3 or 4 years ago, Professor Bonang-Mohale, Vice Chancellor of the University of the Free State, shared a sobering story in his speech. He spoke of young people who, upon being offered an actual job, I think they were given motorbikes, to go and deliver things, and they were offered to be trained there. Upon being offered that, they turned it down rather than risk losing a 350 government grant. Because when the government sees that you have an account, you lose that. So, no, please, let us keep our 350. We do not want that. This is not every young person's story, and I really don't want to generalize, but I just want to make a point about how what is intended to be a relief could be seen as a destiny that is worrying. Which reveals something about our state of mind. And this brings me now to the first strand of Professor Pityana, the Black consciousness. It shows that in some corners of our society, dependence has begun to feel safer than effort. A grant which was meant to be a bridge is becoming a destination. A grant was never meant to compete with a wage. It was meant to carry a person until a wage was possible. Now, when it starts to compete instead, security is mistaken for passivity. And we have allowed dependency to be mistaken for safety. In that way, people begin to see themselves as objects of delivery, rather than agents of their own development, waiting to receive instead of being supported and encouraged to build. And that is tragic. I want to raise a second related pattern, and I ask you to hear it in the spirit in which I intend it, not to blame or to chastise, but an honest question that I think we need to ask ourselves. In many of our townships and villages today, it is often foreign nationals who have opened spaza shops, who run small trading stalls, and build modest enterprises from nothing, often working longer hours and accepting slower returns than many local residents are willing to accept. This has, in some places, cuddled into resentment and even violence against the very people demonstrating the enterprise we say we want to see. But underneath the resentment lies a question we cannot keep dodging. Why is it so often the outsider rather than the local resident who is willing to start small, to reinvest slowly, and to wait years rather than months for a return? From Tata, where I used to work, development projects have repeatedly stalled, not for lack of opportunity, but for lack of patience. A hunger for quick money, where slow, faithful building is what is actually required. If we are serious about unlocking potential through equity and opportunity, we must be honest that opportunity has, in places, been standing in plain sight, and it is patience and attitude, not the presence of the foreigner, that has stood between our people and that opportunity. Black consciousness was born as a protest against precisely this kind of internal defeat. It called on Black South Africans to reject internalized inferiority and to recover a sense of self-worth and responsibility. It said, you are not simply what the system tells you are. You are capable, you are called to stand up, you are to see yourself as an agent, not merely as a victim. Today, we no longer live under apartheid law, but if we are not careful, we may live under apartheid's remaining shadow in our minds, the belief that our fate is always in someone else's hands, that our part is to receive and not to act. To honor Pityana's first strand is to say we cannot settle for a culture in which, whenever a door opens, we prefer to remain seated. We must teach our children and remind ourselves that while the state has duties, business has duties, and the church has duties, we too, as individuals and as a community, have duties to our own potential. We cannot build a just society with citizens who have been convinced that they are permanently powerless and objects of delivery by some people who think that they are in charge. I recall one leader whose name escapes me now, who in his speeches proudly reported now and again the increased numbers of people who receive grants, rather than those who have been empowered to earn their living and therefore their dignity. I just forget the name of this leader. So the first strand of Professor Pityana, Black consciousness, calls us today to a change of mind, away from dependence as a way of life and back toward responsibility, initiative, and dignity. The second strand of Pityana's life is his priesthood and theology. That strand encourages us to learn even more deeply, to lean even more deeply into something that has become one of our country's great hopes, and that is our prophetic character. We South Africans, we can talk. In my installation address in Cape Town, I said that one reason not to despair about this country is that South Africa is, in a real sense, a prophetic country. After a period of lull in the early years of democracy, when many of us grew to trust those in authority and assumed that government would be the primary guardian of justice, something changed. When we were, in that state of lull, the state got looted and became a feeding trough for the greedy and unscrupulous. Rogue business elements like the Guptas, who took advantage of weak institutions, and what became known as state capture exposed how deeply public resources could be hijacked. But in roughly in the past 6 years since COVID period, we have seen a renewed prophetic voice rising from many sectors: civic organizations, journalists, judges, trade unions, analysts, business leaders, and ordinary citizens and churches. We have seen that sense of being prophetic resurging again in the past 6 years. And this prophetic spirit is not confined, as I say, to the churches. Some of those who have spoken most courageously do not stand in pulpits or wear collars. They have acted because they knew that prophetic action is not only a religious thing, it is any courageous speaking of truth for the sake of justice. And a number of such people have paid a high price, including the ultimate price, if you think about whistleblowers, for refusing to look away while the resources meant for common good were looted. We see this prophetic pressure most visibly today in processes such as the Madlanga Commission, where those who have for years plundered this country's resources with impunity are now visibly unshaken when you look at them. The shiver of those who thought they would never be called to account is a sign that the prophetic stance is working. It is law doing its work, but it is also the fruit of many years of whistleblowing, investigative journalism, public protest, and moral insistence that theft from the poor will no longer be tolerated. At the same time, while the country's prophetic voice has grown louder, some of us are still into a faith that comforts individuals and avoids naming the systems and practices that dehumanizes the poor. Some of us, ministers and churches, have remained chaplains to the status quo instead of prophets of change. And beyond the pulpit, many of our young people are being formed by a materialistic, pleasure-seeking culture that cares more about partying and grooving from weekend to weekend than about engaging with the hard questions of justice and dignity as the youth of 1976 did, living as if the struggle that gave them the freedom no longer demand their attention and courage. Driving and making nuisance of the cars of their parents, partying from Friday to Sunday. And it is precisely here that Pityana's priestly and theological strand is a gift. His theology has never separated faith from justice. This strand encourages us to continue and intensify what is already happening, as I've mentioned, since the last 6 years, to join our voices to the prophetic chorus rather than remaining on the sidelines. His life tells us that when churches, academics, civil society speak out clearly against corruption and wrongdoing, they add weight and depth to the wider national conscience. So Pityana's priesthood and his theological acumen are an encouragement to persevere in a prophetic path that has already begun, to speak even more clearly, to support those who take risks for truth, to resist the temptation to settle back into comfortable silence when courage is needed. This second strand of Pityana invites churches and citizens alike to see prophetic courage not as something exceptional, but as a normal part of public faithfulness. If we take that strand seriously, then our churches, together with citizens and institutions of every sector, must once again be places where the poor are not only comforted, but defended, where the rich are challenged to share, where migrants are not scapegoated, but welcome, and where we stand shoulder to shoulder with all who do the hard work, dangerous work of speaking truth to power. The third strand in Pityana's life is his leadership in higher education. But I want to use that strand today to turn our attention slightly lower down the ladder to basic education, beginning with early childhood learning. Education is the greatest equalizer among people. It is the one instrument capable of reaching into a household with no capital, no land, and no connections, and placing there the beginnings of a different future. Pityana showed us that a university can be an instrument of widening access to education. Open and distance learning at UNISA under his leadership was used to reach those who could not access the traditional campuses. That was an important step. But universities work with what schools send them, with what high schools send them. And so that is why I want to talk more about that. Because if the foundations are weak, the best university in the world cannot easily undo that damage. The Department of Basic Education tells us that the class of 2025 achieved a national senior certificate pass rate of 88%, the highest in our history, continuing a climb from 87.3 in 2024 and 82.9 in 2023. Yet the minister herself was careful to temper the celebration. She said only about 84% of learners nationally reach grade 10 at all. So a significant share drop out before the senior phase. The steepest dropout happens between grade 11 and 12, meaning many young people leave school before they even write matric. At the same time, too few learners take mathematics, and among those who do, the pass rate in maths is falling, even as the overall matric percentage rises. Put together, this shows that our challenge is not only at the top. In grade 12, it begins much earlier in the foundations of the system. And that is why I want to suggest that while Pityana's third strand shines at university level, our duty today is to pay particular attention to the earlier stages of learning, early childhood centers, the foundation phase, and the lower grades of primary school. Because it is here that potential must first be noticed. It is here that language, numeracy, curiosity, and confidence are formed or damaged. It is here that children either discover that learning is a joyful, shared adventure, or that school is a place of fear and humiliation. By the time we arrive at matric, much has already been decided in the heart of the child. Too often, we funnel everyone into a single bottleneck, the National Senior Certificate. We push all children into a narrow academic stream, regardless of their gifts, and then we measure success almost entirely by how many pass grade 12. We celebrate that even when some have been coached through the exam by rote learning and memorization, what has been called the art of reproducing answers without understanding. This sets young people up for failure at university, where learning cannot be reduced to memorizing notes. In higher education, no lecturer can carry a student over the line by spoon feeding. Personal effort becomes unavoidable. When a child has been trained for 12 years mainly to repeat rather than to think, the shock of this transition is severe. So, what does Pityana's third strand say to us here? It reminds us that widening access is not only about opening university gates, it is about strengthening the path that leads to those gates. It is about building strong foundations in reading, writing, and thinking, so that when a young person receives an opportunity, they are ready to use it. As a church leader, I cannot speak prophetically to others without also asking what the church is doing. Before I criticize government or business, I must examine my own house. And I just want to say this. The church has been known for education, thanks to the missionaries. But the age of the missionaries who could build and fund a school, largely from overseas mission society, has in truth passed by. The church in South Africa today should continue its involvement in education mainly through partnership among churches themselves, instead of each church operating in a silo with limited resources of personnel and finance. It must consist in partnership with the government, it must consist in partnership with the business, and to use the infrastructure that we have for the purpose of education. This is where I believe we can still do more, even without the resources missionaries once commanded. We may not be able to build many new schools in our own time, but we do have parish halls and church buildings in almost every community, right in the deepest rural areas. The church is there with this building infrastructure. We can put those to work as spaces for early childhood development, after-school support, and literacy programs. This does not mean that the church is taking over the state's responsibility. It means partnership, one where government does not frustrate the church by insisting on doing everything alone when it manifestly cannot, and where the church does not insist on acting alone when collaboration could serve children better. So I want to use the third strand of Pityana's life in education to call us to focus on basic education, to identify potential early, to build strong foundations, to avoid forcing every child through the same narrow academic bottleneck, and to insist on quality metric, not just any metric. A certificate earned through genuine understanding is a key. A certificate produced by mere memorization is a fragile comfort that does not last very long. It shatters quickly as soon as that young person goes to the university or go to work. If we honor him in this way, we honor not only his work at the university level, but the entire educational journey of our children. The fourth and the last strand is development and public civic work, including Pityana's involvement in the lottery space. Here the question is simple but demanding. What do we do with the resources that we have in order to develop the potential of other people? We live in a country, as I've said, where there are real poverty issues. In my installation address as Archbishop of Cape Town, I said, we see obscene wealth among a few in a sea of poverty. You could almost say you see a sea of poverty and small islands of obscene wealth. And I was speaking to big business and billionaires, of which they are quite substantial in Cape Town. And inviting them to move beyond token gestures to real sharing, to move from posing for a photo for what the company is doing, and to write a supposedly good report for social outreach, to real sharing and empowering. But I also went on to say that the task of uplifting others is not only for the very rich, because you see, no one, even among us here, can and has the right really to be pointing fingers to billionaires and excuse ourselves. Because at different levels, according to our capacities, we do have something. We do have something and therefore can do something. The question is whether what we do is truly proportionate to what we have. It reminds me of the people when they are taking collection in the church. You sort of see that they are sort of sifting, which in the pocket, and those who have purses, they go, and you see a 50 rand, and I'm thinking, could it not have been a 200 rand? And that is how we tend to give. We are not giving for a successful end. We are giving to appease our conscience. That we have given. And so the question is whether what we have, as I say, is proportionate to what we give, or whether what we are offering is just mere token to soothe our conscience without making any difference in the life of the person who needs assistance to develop his or her potential. That must be the aim of our giving. We need to desist from the attitude of caring only for our families and at best for our extended families. Black people have this, what is called black tax. You support the child of your cousin and the niece of your father-in-law. But anyone who does not fall into this genealogical, list, you sort of feel exempt, from assisting. As long as you have assisted, that belongs to the to the blood, And our assistance should not be limited, really, within family circles. Everyone in need, particularly with regard to education, must be our concern as individuals, personally in our lives, as formations or as trustees. Because as I have said, education is the greatest equalizer of all people. I'm sure you all know this. If it were not for the help he received from someone outside his family, Raymond Zondo might have remained simply Mr. Zondo. But because a non-family benefactor saw his struggle and sponsored his university studies, he became Chief Justice Zondo and one of the finest guardians of our constitutional democracy. It should pain us to see a young person that I had seen 10 years ago, and I realized that there was a call for me to do something, and I didn't. And then 10 years later, you see that young person being on the drains. Just think if you do something for that young person, and then you see him 10 years later, that he is into something like Raymond Zondo. That would give you joy. You would have developed a potential. As with education, I must also ask what the church is doing about development before I speak again to others. The church has not been absent from development. In the past, missionaries in my Catholic tradition, like Father Bernard Haas at Marian Hill, combined faith, education, agriculture, and cooperative economics to help African communities move from dependency to self-reliance. Under his simple motto, better homes, better fields, better hearts, Haas arrives at Marian Hill in 1895 at the age of 19, became fluent in isiZulu, isiXhosa, and Sesotho, founded the Catholic African Union in 1926, and wrote on the value of cooperative credit for African communities under the title People's Bank. An idea decades ahead of the microfinance movement that today we take for granted. The lottery system at its best is one example of how public resources can be used to support development. It gathers funds from many small contributions and then allocates them to projects that, if well chosen and well monitored, can change lives. Pityana's development strand and examples like Father Haas remind us that justice is not only about sermon and slogans. It is about budgets, grants, bursaries, housing, projects, training programs, and all the concrete mechanisms by which we move resources into people's lives. It also reminds us that development is not charity. It is about enabling people to stand on their own feet, to move from dependency to independence. That is why when we think about grants, we must see them as a starting point, not an end point. We must ask, what pathways are we creating from support to self-sufficiency? How are we using public funds to build capacity, not just to prevent collapse? How are we ensuring that lotto money, the corporate social investment, the church's land and buildings, foundations, and trusts are all used to open doors rather than decorate reports with accounts of charity activities. In other words, the fourth strand of Pityana's life calls us to take development seriously as a form of justice. It says that if we want to improve quality of life for all, we cannot be content with a few showcase projects. We must commit to a pattern of investment that steadily increases the capability of our people, as we saw in the legacy of missionaries like Father Haas and in the work of centers like the Catholic Development Center in Amtata. Let me draw these strands together. Black Consciousness strand tells us that we must break the mentality of dependence and internalize inferiority. It challenges young people and all of us to see ourselves as agents, not permanent recipients. It speaks directly to the temptation to settle for grants when work opportunities are available, and the temptation to resent the immigrant entrepreneur rather than learn from their patience. Priesthood and theological strand calls all of us, churches, citizens, and institutions, out of quietism. It reminds us that we are called to be prophetic, to speak against corruption, obscene wealth, crime, xenophobia, and the erosion of ubuntu. Singathuli izinto zisonakala. The education strand, inspired by his university leadership, calls us today to focus on basic education, to strengthen early childhood learning, to build firm foundations in literacy and numeracy, to identify different kinds of potential early, to avoid bottlenecking everyone into a narrow metric path, and to insist on quality metric rather than rogue learning that collapses at university. The development and lottery strand insists that justice must be funded, organized, and implemented. It calls on us to turn resources into opportunity, to see development as part of equity, and to use tools like the Lotto, church land, and community structures responsibly to support those who would otherwise be left behind, carrying forward in our own modest way what Father Haas began a century ago. The question is, are we willing to move from dependency to agency? Are our churches willing to move from quietism to prophetic courage? Are we willing to invest seriously in basic education, from the creche to the classroom, so that every child has a real foundation? Are our institutions of development ready to move from rhetoric to real opportunity? These are not questions for government alone. They are questions for all of us. God is still raising prophets in civic organizations, unions, the media, business, the judiciary, churches, and among ordinary citizens. Our task is not to remain silent while things fall apart, but to play our part in holding them together and rebuilding what is broken. Let me conclude by returning to the men we honor. Professor Pityana's life joins protest and institution building, conscience and scholarship, freedom and discipline. He has shown that dignity must sometimes be asserted before it is recognized, and that it is not going to be given on a platter. We need to fight for it. And that institutions must also be shaped so that dignity becomes possible for ordinary people. He has moved between black consciousness and priesthood, between university and development, without losing the sight of the human being at the center. Honoring him today is not only about applauding him, it is to let his four strands challenge our four crises that I have referred to. Let us then commit ourselves to a change of mind so that fewer of our people live in quiet dependence when they could stand. Let us commit ourselves to a prophetic courage so that churches, citizens, institutions, and leaders in every sector refuse to be silent while human dignity is trampled on. Let us commit ourselves to strong foundations in basic education so that our children gain not only certificates but real capabilities from their earliest years and to just development so that resources in this country are used to widen opportunities and not only to enrich a few. If we do that, then this lecture, this celebration, and this gathering under the auspices of the Lottery will not be a mere ceremony. They will be a step toward the very thing our theme announces: improving quality of life for all and unlocking the potential of every person through equity and opportunity. May God grant us the courage to take that step. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I wish I was not making an announcement straight after this most wonderful lecture, but I have to. There is a white car. I did not get the make, but its registration MS16FHGP. It's blocking access, so the caterers cannot come in, they cannot leave, and they've been waiting for the past 40 or so minutes. If this is your car, please move the car. I hope someone recognizes the car and that is not a hired car, and we... Nonetheless, let's continue. Archbishop Sipuka, what an inimitable way of delivering a lecture. And I will remember in particular your negotiation of crisis of conscience over gambling. That's linked to the improvement of lives. But what an astute delivery, your poise, your insights. And you asked difficult questions. I know someone will thank you, but as an academic, I'm really attracted to saying something after such an amazing delivery. So you did ask difficult questions about effort and potential, crisis of leadership, black consciousness, practical religion and justice, entitled and directionless youth, miseducation, circumscribed generosity, development as justice, and you wove most masterfully all of these around the life of Professor Pityana, around the four strands that you spoke of. I think I speak for everyone that we feel elevated after your lecture. Thank you so much. Prof. Pityana, cometh your moment. We have celebrated you. Please come and respond. Can we give him a round of applause, please?
Wow, I'm particularly moved, Arch, for sharing with us the way you did. But I wish to say thank you very much to all of you who are here today. It's an amazing gathering that is here today. But I must say that I wasn't part of this conspiracy. Somebody who's sitting there sort of easily said to me, what would you like your lecture, your farewell to be? Would you like a lecture? What about going to your province? What about this? What about that? And none of this was shared with me. And then I come here, and then I was asked, who would you like to speak? And without hesitation, I said, His Grace Archbishop Sepuka, Metropolitan Archbishop of Cape Town, would be the ideal candidate. I hadn't spoken to him, by the way. But I knew that in him we need a fresh voice that was actually coming and would actually enable us to understand our service to be. But before I go into that, I want first of all to acknowledge and to thank my own family who are here. My wife Dimza, who's sitting there. Dimza and I have been married for 56 years. And I do want to say that I've been married to only one wife. I've never been married to another one. And I've never had another wife. And I trust it's the same with her, although I can't vouch for it. And Dimza has been an amazing partner from our youth many years ago. Together we went through banning orders, we went through imprisonment, we went through police detention, and we went through that. And we're still standing together. And with her is Ntsiki Biko, Mandlovu, who has been for many years a very dear friend. And Bantu Biko, her husband, was a particularly special friend to me. But these two young wives that Steve and I were married to, Mr. Tembe, we lived in Durban in our early years, almost a year after we got married, both of us. And these two women were extremely foolish to marry us, to tell the truth, because we had absolutely nothing. And we were causing trouble for everybody. We were bound to spend many years in jail. And we had nothing. We had no money. They can't be saying that we are special. There was nothing special about it. And Ntsiki, Dimza, myself, and Steve, we shared a house in Mlazi. So we lived in Mlazi. And Steve was a very innovative sort of person. I don't know how he got us a house. These days, he would go before Madlanga, I suspect. So we lived, the four of us, and our two babies, children, shared this house, and which was the most wonderful, wonderful time with these two great friends, very different people. Steve and I were very different, but we were absolutely special to each other. And so Ntsiki is here. And Ntsiki has a very, very special place in our hearts. And of course, some of you may know, and there may be others who don't know, that Steve was murdered by the police in his youth, barely 30 years old. And a very, very sad moment. But I have to say this as well, because I say this all the time. In 1977, I was at the point of applying for admission as an attorney because I'd finished everything else. And the Law Society at that time decided that they will not, they would oppose my application for admission. Then instead of being admitted, I then got put in jail. So I ended up in jail for 12 months without trial. And shortly after my arrest in jail, amazingly, because I thought, this was, and Siki may remember, this was almost immediately after speaking to Steve and Siki on the phone, which we're not supposed to do, by the way. We did everything we were not supposed to do. On the phone, we must have spent about an hour on the phone. And then the police walk in, and they take me that I go to jail. So I went to jail. That was on the 15th of August. I know that because that morning I had gone to get a driver's license. So my driver's license tells me when I went to jail. So I actually went to jail. 3 days later, the same security police came to me with great agitation and excitement. And I'm in solitary confinement. And they said, yeah, you guys have had it now. We're going to jail for a long time. We now found you and Steve together are in jail, and you'll never see the light of day after that. I didn't realize what that was about. And then sitting in this prison, not prison, police station cells, they had a colored policeman, constable, looking after this cell. It was an underground cell in the old police station in Port Elizabeth Central. And then on a certain day, suddenly this colored chap is not there. And they open, there's a white constable there. And this constable, white guy, who was very, very young, must have just sort of joined. And he sees me, and he gets a shock of his life. He said, "Meneer de procureur, wat soek jy hierso?" So he was very shocked that this, as far as I was an article clerk, but I had a right of appearance. So I used to appear in the court where he was an orderly, this young man. And he says, I was told that there's a baie gevaarlike terrorist hierso. And of course, this young man couldn't believe it because, as far as he's concerned, I'm a very nice attorney who comes in and next thing is told that this is a terrible fellow. So this young man was actually very, very genuine. He's straight out of school, Afrikaans speaking. So he knew that I couldn't read Afrikaans papers. He's not supposed to do this, but he brought me newspapers every morning in English. So I could read newspapers that he brings, which is not supposed to do. And it was through that newspaper that I learned a day or so that Steve had died. So this young man had to confront me in my absolute anger. I could have killed somebody. He just didn't know what to do with me. He was completely unaware. So I guess if he knew who Steve was, he would not have allowed me to read his paper. But he didn't. He knew nothing. He was a very innocent young man. So that's how I got to know when Steve was murdered by the same people who were keeping me in jail. So as it happened, I didn't get out of prison until the following year in August 1978. So when Steve was killed, I was in jail. When there was a funeral, so I was out of it all. So you'll understand then why the Biko family has always meant so much to me. And Steve and I come a very, very long way. And we shaped ours and other people's thinking continuously from the time we were at school together. And we went, my early years was at Lovedale. This place has very, very strong and special memories for me. Because I went to, as a 14-year-old, I went to Lovedale, to school at Lovedale. And I did JC there, and I did matric. And then I got kicked out of Lovedale. Frankly, I was 16. How old was I? 17. I actually don't even know why I was kicked out. I still don't understand. Because I was just such a good boy. I tried to find out why was I kicked out of Lovedale. And anyway, I went away back to home in PE, and I then went to Forte. And then, of course, when I went to Forte, in my third year, I got kicked out of Forte. So I always tell people that I spent something like 7 years, nearly 8 years, in the Victoria East District, as it was then called. And I never got anything. I always say that not because I was dumb. On the contrary, I was a good student. So it's wonderful to be here, and of course I wasn't the only one. I mean, Professor Ngutlu is just wonderful to have you here, because Professor Ngutlu and I were at Lovedale together, and he probably knows what he did. I don't know what I did, but he probably knows what he did to be kicked out. And he ended up at Robben Island, and like me, he lost time, and we were at Forte together at the same time. Coming back after losing time back at Forte, we became very, very special, supportive to one another, people. So Sonjaya, it's good to have you here. Thank you so much. And of course, as you've just heard, this area is also very special to me, because I kind of consider myself an honorary Umdlambe. So Archive Azweliating, it's lovely to have you here. Because, I went to initiation at Ngwahuni as a 19-year-old. So andalugele Ngwahuni. So, I mean, that makes me a complete Mdlambe, almost, doesn't it? And after that, it's been wonderful to also discover, if you like, that in fact that my grandfather, S.A.K. Mkai, was also somebody whom Amandlambe had adopted, and he became quite a counselor, Yamandlambe. And his homestead was here in Dabozuko, up the road from here. So this all means so much to me. That is only really to say that while I wasn't responsible for coming here, but I may have sent some hints that in choosing a place to go, you've got to open new ground in terms of an institution that kind of vibes with the kind of things that we want to do. And if you're going to the Eastern Cape, I said, maybe University Walter Sisulu should be the first person you check if you can go. And so we're here. Your Grace, thank you so much for that amazing address. I am hoping, like a scholar that I am, I'm hoping that Walter Sisulu will publish it. And because I think that should be a way of sharing. The reason that I think it is important, because for all the reasons that you know and you've heard, I puzzle personally deeply as to how did we come to be here. I think that we put together, we struggled, and we removed apartheid, and we made every effort. I was in exile for 15 years, and I believed I knew exactly what the ANC stood for, what it actually will do for the good of our country at that time. And I have to admit that we live in a time in our country of deep pain, that many South Africans are very much in pain about what it is that we can do, what can be done. And with it also is the collapse, painfully so, of our democratic system and values and constitutionalism, that somehow I'm one of those who believed very deeply that contained the instruments for the better life that South Africa was capable of doing, which was not just simply different and more fulfilling than the apartheid system that we came from, but one that assured to many, if not all South Africans, with life, that the constitutional values of human dignity, the achievement of equality, and the advancement of human rights and freedoms remains a very, very important value that is very important for us. And it's a great deal of what we read from Fanon and elsewhere, nobody really is able to come to understand what happens to liberation struggles, post-liberation, so to speak. What actually happens? How do the liberators, if you like, end up becoming no different from the oppressive state that you had come from? I've been working on Michel Foucault, the French philosopher, who was trying to articulate, I haven't seen anybody doing that. I mean, Fanon basically throws all the things that you expect, and defines all that is bad and wrong with the post-colonial African governments, etc. That's not what I was looking for. I was looking to say, what happens? What actually happens? And Foucault said, actually it's a deeper understanding of what is the ethos of the practice of freedom. In other words, not liberation war, liberation struggle, not even struggle. It is the idea of freedom. What actually is freedom? Foucault says freedom actually is a series of behaviors and activities and beliefs that establish a pattern of democratic relationships that should follow in the wake of liberation. In other words, the idea is the essence of freedom. The matter is, what exactly does freedom? Freedom doesn't mean when you pull down another flag and put up another flag. It's not even when you have a well-crafted, beautiful document that actually expresses the essence or the depth of what we feel we want to be of our country. Freedom is actually when you are actually in that system and you really say, what are the responsibilities of being a person who lives in freedom? And you know that you're not just an animal that's kind of running around and looking for those whom it might remove. And Foucault says it's about the behaviors that we amass following in the wake of liberation. That's what it is. So unless you actually pay special attention, what are the behaviors that actually define the idea of liberation that we should be talking about? So in articulating Foucault, Tsene Serekabehan in his Hermeneutics of African Philosophy, he says the absence of the practice of freedom is the origin of the undemocratic nature of post-colonial regimes. Lacking to understand what is it to be a person living in freedom, living without fear, living in a manner that actually enables others to live without fear, that enables that freedom to be the basis on which we discover our humanity. We realize that our humanity is tied up with the humanity of others, and we work for the assertion of that sense of being human. And Tsene says that unless we really realize that the practice of freedom is grounded in the self-reformative ethos of the people. In other words, if our ethos is one that seeks always to actually, in theological terms, we talk about the sort of penitential, Your Grace, penitential understanding of what it is to live in a penitential state. In a sense that I am never going to be the perfect thing or being that sometimes I wish I was. But I need to understand that I'm always in a state of reformation. I'm in a state of becoming. I'm in a state of becoming better than I was. I seek always to become a person whose very being is on understanding that in order for me to be fully and wholly human, then it means that I must be with others who are seeking that wholeness of being human. So it seems to me that, and I actually have begun to explore this to say, what actually is freedom? I mean, we talk about liberation, okay, fine. But at the end of the day, the outcome of liberation is freedom. There can be no liberation without freedom. If you live in your post-liberation age with other forms of oppression, whether it's oppression through individualism, materialism, of ethnicity and thinking that other people are things that are not human. I can do whatever I like. Or power, how we use power, then you're not free. You are not in a state of freedom. Because you are always by nature, you are a denier of freedom yourself. You cannot be a person of freedom in isolation. You are a person of freedom in partnership with others. You seek to do this. And that, I think, is a substance of what His Grace the Metropolitan Archbishop of Cape Town was sharing with us today. That as people, we must actually always be on the lookout. What is it that we can do to become better people? In the National Lotteries Commission, we recognized right from the beginning, the board that was appointed in March 2022, I think, that I joined in September, joined the National Lotteries Commission at a particular time, at a particular moment, when the members of the board and senior executives of the National Lotteries Commission were engaged in wholesale looting of the purse of the poor people of our country, without shame, without fear, without shame, completely. If you have a chairperson of the board who is a pastor, whose wife is also a pastor, amassing 27 million rand to build himself a house, and 6 million rand that is not his money to buy himself a car that is going to probably sit in a garage because he can't drive it. And another senior executive was responsible for stealing all the money in order to build a church in his village. Then you know that we are in trouble. We are in serious trouble. So we've been seeking at that time to spend not too much time on, partly because we didn't need to do that because the president appointed the SIU to investigate this. So ours was to respond and support what the SIU was doing. But we needed a deeper, more important task to transform the mind of the National Lotteries Commission so that the mind of the National Lotteries Commission must be such as to understand what it is to live the ethos of freedom. Not only that we should be infused with the idea that South Africa is a developmental project. South Africa is a developmental project. And in its wisdom, the parliament of the country passed the National Lotteries Act to give effect to that developmental idea. And because that developmental idea is fundamental to this ethos of freedom that we are talking about. So when you then spend all your time ravaging and undermining that, you're ravaging the total national outlook that really is beginning to be part of the formation of what this country is about. We worked on that with colleagues from the beginning to try to change. The second thing that we recognize is that the NLC had been established 25 years. It was an opportunity, perhaps, to say that maybe there are certain things about the NLC that are tired. And people have come to take it for granted for too long. Oh, it is there, you just fill in, you get what you like, and you walk away, you don't use it for what it was. Nobody will know. We thought that it was probably tired. We needed to revive the language and the messaging and give it a new head start, so that the people understand in a way that they probably might not have understood, that we are not just doing a compliance mechanism. One of the, as a student at Lovedale, I'm finishing this before I'm a preacher, so I could go on forever. So, there was a wonderful man, Reverend Mokitimi. I was a little boy, 15 years perhaps. I was 15 when I joined the ANC, by the way, at Lovedale, one of the wonderful things I did. But at 15 at Lovedale, I remember Seth Mokitimi coming to preach. I mean, can you imagine that? From that time, I remember that perfectly today. That's what a good preacher does. And he said to us, in Europe, a man was walking in a village and found a man breaking stones as he entered the village. And he asked this man, so-and-so, what are you doing? And the man says, I'm breaking stones, can't you see? I'm breaking stones, can't you see? And of course he was breaking stones. And of course I could see. But this man actually saw the breaking of stones as the ultimate in what he was doing. And then he goes to the second person who was also breaking stones separately from this one. What are you doing? He says, I'm earning a living. What do you expect me to do? I'm earning a living. Couldn't see anything else but what happens for himself. So he says he went to the third man, and the man says, what are you doing breaking stones? He says. And the man says, I'm building a cathedral, don't you know? I'm building a cathedral, don't you know? And Mokitimi says, I recall so much. He says, actually, there was no sign of a cathedral. There was nothing. But this man could see, or could almost envision what that stone is building. He could almost point it and said, that stone will become the cornerstone. That becomes the pride of our community. Now I think that's what we want to do when we make grants, so that people who have what may appear to be small ideas can actually see what those small ideas can become in building a nation. Thank you, Archbishop.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will let the weight of that continue to percolate in our minds. Having said that, I am going to ask that we have messages of support. The first one will come from the incoming NLC board chairperson, Mr. Thembinkosi Bonakele. The second one will come from the Honorable MEC Sibulele Ngongo. In fact, there are three. Then the last one, the third one, Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Mr. Zuko Kodlimpi. I've been advised to ask you to be economical with time. Thank you.
You should have advised the drafters of the program. You are advising the wrong people. We've been asked to come and speak. Let me also stand on the protocol. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. In the interest of time, I wish to, I don't know why this is called a message of support. It sounds like a political rally. But maybe I should give a message of support to Aunt Dimza for finally having her husband back. I do suspect that she has had a hand in this early retirement of Professor Pityana, because he's still very energetic. And I mean, it's a little bit of a trap, I suspect, to be called to come and speak after the Arch and then after Professor Pityana. I'm not therefore going to give a lecture. We've always been fascinated by revolutionaries, people of our age. I remember I had a picture of Steve Biko in one of my books in high school as part of the cover. And we've always known the likes of Professor Pityana, so you can only imagine what it has meant for me to serve with him as colleagues at the board. When I was a young lawyer, during the early days of freedom and the Higher Education Act and these measures that were conceived of universities, I was once asked to do a research because the minister at the time had decided that the contracts of university vice-chancellors should not be extended pending the measures. And Professor Pityana was the vice-chancellor of UNISA. And his term was coming to an end. Of course, ordinarily this would not need an opinion because we all know that ministers don't appoint vice-chancellors. And the research came back saying exactly this. And everybody knows that Professor Pityana unenkani. So I didn't go to the minister to deliver the opinion we had done. A senior partner at the law firm went and came back sweating because the minister had asked him, even before he delivered the paper, just tell me, how do we get rid of Pityana? To cut the long story short, Professor Pityana never left. But he is leaving the NLC now in his own terms. Prof. Pityana has been an inspiration to us all. I will not talk about what he has already mentioned, except to summarize it, that he was indeed a bulwark against corruption and malfeasance, and we could not have had a better person. a bulldog to take this difficult task on. He did it without fear or favor, trepidation, or any doubt. His moral leadership of the organization was outstanding and will remain an inspiration to both the board and staff of the NLC for a very long time. So thank you very much, Prof, for that. We will also miss his sharpness in the debates at the NLC. He chaired the board, as you know. He also chaired a board review committee, which reviews the applications, appeals from the applications, mainly that were rejected. And you could never predict where Prof. Pityana is going to land on a matter. In the middle of the war in Gaza, the NLC receives an application from a Jewish center for a grant to provide education to kids on Jewish history, genocide, and Jewish culture. The immediate knee-jerk reaction of some of us is a worry about whether this is not a center that is going to indoctrinate kids to Zionism. Prof. Pityana, I remember him asking, is it not a good thing for young kids of all backgrounds to learn Jewish history and culture? And from that moment, the debate changed. He would tell us about how much he loves cricket, and yet when there is an application from cricket sporting bodies, he will remind us about how rich the South African Cricket Board is. He would tell us that he is a township boy. He's never lived in a village. But he would be the first one to go visit our traditional leaders. He's been to a lot of great places. Here, KwaGagabe, I know. When there were floods in Mthatha, he spoke to the Tembu King. And so the dynamism of him has left, I think, a legacy of debates. You've all seen him here. You know, I can't lie about this. The last thing I really want to say, because I think it probably worries Prof. Pityana. What he hated the most was the rejection of applications for grant when the need for granting them was so obvious. You see, we ask for all sorts of compliance documents when somebody applies for grants. But what Prof. Pityana couldn't tolerate was the idea that in the South Africa we live in today, that the NLC could have a multi-year surplus in grant funding. Prof. Pityana, I'm sure that you are going to be watching us on this. If we don't finish the surplus, you must ask Jody. I wish you very well in your retirement. I know that you are not a man who retires, but I think you deserve a break. You've done so much for our country. Thank you very much, and all the best.
Bona ke ngokuthatha emva kwabantu abadala kuyasokolisa Mr. Bonakele. Ngoba ngonza uthetha emva komuntu onamava. Bebenamava amaninzi nawe bebephambi kwakho. Kodwa ke molweni ndivumeleni ndithi kule protocol ebi-establishwe apha ya-adoptwa nam ndiyinxalenye yayo. I will not waste time. Ndibulisa. Kodwa isihlwele ke masinicamakishele. Mhlawumbi bandiqanda ndithi congratulations to you, Joy. At least ndime phambi kwakho ndingakho nkundleni. On your appointment as an acting justice of the Constitutional Court. Sinomntu omkhulu apha endlini, asizubotshwa. Which is the highest court in our land, which therefore means noba sesisondelela ubotshwa uthi yimani ngalo. Beke wasasendlini enye. Ngeye imini. Allow me to say that today there are occasions when the public office requires us to speak on behalf of government. And there are also occasions when we speak from genuine admiration. And today is such one day. We gather not simply to mark the conclusion of a distinguished tenure, but to celebrate a lifetime of principled leadership, intellectual excellence, and an unwavering service to our nation. Professor Pityana has never confined himself to the pursuit of personal success. His life's work has been devoted to building institutions, advancing justice, and creating opportunities for others to realize their full potential. If there is anything that we were never taught about Prof is that ebeke wangumntwana ohluphayo. Uyayiva pha kuye ba ebengumntwana ohluphayo Prof. And I hope Sinsiki you will agree with me when I say together with your husband. Utatu Steve. I'm hoping to see you, Prof, soon when we are doing our activities and our programs at the Ginsberg, where we always commemorate the life of Utata with the family of Ubiko. It is therefore fitting that we pause to honor a leader whose legacy reaches far beyond the offices he has held. We gather under the inspiring theme at improving quality of life for all, unlocking potential of every person through equity and opportunity. And therefore, this theme reflects values that Professor Pityana has championed throughout his distinguished career as a lawyer, a theologian, an academic, a human rights activist, and an institution builder. Kunjingalwazi utata omkhulu omdala. Kodwa, there's one thing that I've learned in him. There was a new young mind in an old body. And I asked myself, how did this happen? Because every time we were engaging, he would he would bring up new ideas, provoke more on me on, I should be thinking better than what I'm saying. Like, I would feel that he is saying now, think better than what you are saying. Because I even went as far and said, I was with Sam in Gauteng one time, and I had said to Sam, no. There's a young mind in an old body with this one. There's something that is not going well. Mcha Prof. And I believe ilando yofunda iya imenza mcha ngakumbi. Uprof ke ngomnye wesizukulwana senkokheli who understood that freedom must be accompanied by justice, that democracy must be anchored in ethical leadership, and that development must ultimately improve the lives of ordinary people. His contribution to the struggle for justice, his leadership within higher education, his unwavering commitment to constitutional democracy, and his stewardship of the National Lotteries Commission have left an enduring legacy that will continue to inspire generations of South Africans. Program Director, allow me to share a personal reflection. I think Sandy Dachile, that on the 26th of November 2025, Gauteng, during the National Lotteries Commission in Daba, which was held in Birchwood Hotel, our lunchtime, Zandive, ndaichitha into phaa 2 hours with Prof. Of course, we were talking about issues as Valekle. We spoke extensively about the future of the Eastern Cape, the transformative role that the National Lotteries Commission could continue to play in community development, and the opportunities that lie ahead for our province as the home of legends. Diakhalaza ke Advocate Ngaitobi that we are the home of legends, we have everything, we have you, we have Prof, we have everything. But hey, Bapem. Dikhalelwa mabasa kokwazi into zilapha kuba bangabuya nazo eGoli baze nazo apha. Mabazithathe eGoli bazise ekhaya ezuko nize nazo apha ekhaya. Zinhle into endizibona apha. One of the discussions that remains in my mind is one of the It was the opportunities that were presented by the upcoming 2027 ICC Cricket World Cup that we spoke immensely about, of course, with the Commissioner, Ms. Scholes as well, no Prof. However, Prof immediately appreciated the significance of the global event, not only as a supporting spectacle, but as an opportunity to leverage sport for economic growth, tourism, youth development, social cohesion, and lasting community benefit. Mna ndithetha nge-World Cup ezayo, ndithetha nge-vibe, ndithetha ngemali endiyidingayo uba ndingenza njani for me to host, because as the province we have two metros to which we have applied to host this World Cup. And the Prof has looked at me and dwelled so long on the issues that the province and the country should be benefiting from on this World Cup that I'm talking about. And I was like, yo, fresh, inja. And I was excited. Mr. Bonagele, because to me, he did not say the people of the cricket are rich. But he advised me on the steps to follow for us as the province to be able to get funding that will assist us as the province to be able to host the World Cup, to which there were some chances that we may not host because of our infrastructure. So my engagements were around that. Although some of those discussions remain unfinished, I leave that encounter inspired by his wisdom and confident that the foundation he has laid will continue to guide the work of the National Lotteries Commission for years to come. His contribution to the struggle for justice, his leadership within higher education, his unwavering commitment to constitutional democracy, and his stewardship of the National Lotteries Commission, which have left an enduring legacy that will continue to inspire generations of South Africans. As the Eastern Cape, we take particular pride in celebrating one of our own. Yavuba yonke lento ungwalapha ekhaya. Kuyo yonke lento esiyithetha sibuye sithi no Chief Justice phaa enkundleni ezinkulu kwala ekhaya. So asizube sisokolisana, sizothi xa kucaba asiyifumani funding, Honorable Masina phaa ka-National, sithathe into zethu sibuye zizekhaya, sinyeke ke. This province has produced many leaders who have shaped the conscience of our nation, and Professor Pityana stands prominently amongst them. His life's work demonstrates that intellectual excellence must always be accompanied by humility, service, and an unwavering commitment to humanity. The National Lotteries Commission occupies a unique place in South Africa's developmental landscape. Beyond regulating the national lottery, it has become an important catalyst for community development, supporting organizations that serve the most vulnerable, and expanding opportunities in sport, arts, culture, heritage, education, social welfare, and many other sectors that improve the quality of life of our people. Mr. Honorable Masina, can you sofuneka sithetha apha what is it that is so important for the people of this Eastern Cape and as well as the people of South Africa that we must budget for them when they are in cells, when they are in prison, rather than budgeting for them so that we can prevent them going to prison? Who stands to shape a human being? Who stands to build a society that we want? Is it correctional services, or is it a preventative measure that we can put in place? I think we must argue and engage on such issues so that imali singayibhatali kakhulu kubameli. Siyibhatale kakhulu sakha amabala, sakhe art centers so that sizokwakha umntu simdevelope kakuhle, and they will also be able to know and respect their heritage. Kakuhle apha eMpuma Koloni siqala apha senze ipilot apha lento sinyuke nayo ke ngoku. As a Department of Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture, we appreciate the strategic partnerships that have enabled many organizations, artists, athletes, heritage institutions, and community initiatives to grow and make a meaningful contribution to society. These investments are not merely financial, they restore dignity, create opportunities, nurture talent, and strengthen social cohesion. Today's celebration, therefore, goes beyond recognizing an individual. It is a celebration of ethical leadership, visionary, institution building, and a steadfast belief that every South African deserves the opportunity to realize their full potential. Singavalelwa, singekayi realized. As we honor Professor Pityana, we also congratulate Mr. Bonagel, on his appointment as the incoming chairperson of the National Lotteries Commission. Sihlalo webhodi uvile mosiba besimane sixoxa nosihlalo bephuma so mane sixoxa ke na ungasivaleli ngaphandle. uGladys is aware that we always engage because we are looking forward for the development of this province and the benefit of the sector that we lead. We wish him and the board every success as they continue to strengthen public confidence in the institution and advance its important developmental mandate. Professor Pityana, your legacy cannot be measured only by the positions you have held, but by the countless lives you have influenced, the institutions you have strengthened, and the values you have consistently upheld. On behalf of the Department of Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture, and the people of the Eastern Cape, I extend our heartfelt gratitude for your exceptional contribution to our country. We wish you good health. Umphathe kakuhle mama. Oh madoda. Umoya ngoku. Umvasinyawo. Akuve. I'm sure you have never enjoyed or experienced having him for a full week without receiving any calls that calls him to go out. We wish you good health, Tata, a continued wisdom, and every success in the next chapter of your remarkable journey. Amako.
Thank you very much, and a good day to everyone. And I also request that I be allowed to stand on the protocol that has been established. I will just mention His Grace the Archbishop, and thank you for what was certainly a lecture about the life of Professor Pityana that truly reflects all dimensions of his being. I still have an opportunity to talk about Professor Pityana later today, so I'm not going to dwell much on that, except to say on behalf of the political leadership of the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, we will be eternally grateful for him accepting the invitation to serve as the chairperson of the NLC in 2022. Prof accepted a task that any other sensible human being would have avoided completely, because he accepted to lead the institution when it was in perennial crisis. Its public reputation was at its lowest, its institutional coherence did not exist, and simply because his name is Barney Pityana, the department benefited immensely because his personal integrity provided the moral cover we needed to recalibrate the institution. And but I've shared this with him, I was quite surprised when I heard that he's retiring, and I was not happy, because I thought that his presence was very useful for a couple of reasons, one of which was mentioned by the incoming chairperson. Uprof ngumuntu onenkani. Uyabona ke ezinye izinto zifuna umuntu onenkani. So sometimes when ndiyabona ngondithembele apha enkanini kaprof uzawududula ngoku, because uba ikeya nomuntu obhetye sawucollapsa sonke. So one of the encounters I had with Prof in 2024 upon assuming office was related to the crisis of conscience that the Archbishop expressed, and I raised it with Prof. So I have this peculiar problem in life, and it always comes up with me in my portfolio now. There's the National Lotteries Commission, there's the National Gambling Board, there's the Cannabis Master Plan. Now, the problem with me is that I was born in a Methodist church family, and then I went to school in a Catholic boarding school. So le nto yoba ndithi ekhaya ndiphangela umsebenzi wentsangu andikwazi kuyicacisa. So I said to Prof about the National Lotteries Commission, we're having a discussion about something that was, I said, Prof, why don't you guys take this decision? Prof says, no, that's the purview of you as leaders. I said, yeah, but I don't want to be involved in anything to do with gambling, Prof. Can you, because my conscience, I struggle to explain this thing. What is the rationality of gambling in what we're building in society? But I think you answered it perfectly well. That contained in that is the possibility to use gambling as a productive institution when its proceeds are channeled appropriately. And so we're very grateful that the Prof has assisted us to try bring the NLC back to life. And Prof, yes, you are retiring. I'm not sure if you are going to retire, because you've spent virtually about 95% of your life engaged in productive public life. But I do think that we will benefit from you sitting at home to give us your reflections about the journey that you've walked, and some of the questions that you're asking about where things went wrong could potentially be answered in the work that you will do when you sit at home. Suffice to say, we've had a difficult relationship with Prof as student leaders in South Africa. No acting justice up. Prof Pityana, because he is a founder of the revolutionary tradition of the student movement in South Africa, he became a difficult interlocutor on the other side of the equation. So we would come as the South African Students' Congress to explain what the philosophical and ideological justification of transformation is, and Prof would engage in a manner that sometimes suggested that you can't tell me about what I invented. So those who experienced him as a vice-chancellor in UNISA, he was a very difficult vice-chancellor to deal with, because he could take you to task about the history of higher education transformation and some of the problems that arose. So you had to know your story. But one memorable encounter I had with Prof was in 2012 at the launch of the biography of Steve Biko by Kolela Mangu in PE. Man, I realized Prof is a very difficult person indeed. Professor Mangu has this book, and it details exactly how black consciousness is understood. Hey, what followed there was, let me just say, Prof taught all of us what they were doing when they were designing black consciousness, and that sometimes we are guilty of misunderstanding exactly what the philosophical tradition is about. The second one was a lecture that Prof, and I chanced upon it accidentally, the same 2012, a lecture at LSE on black consciousness, black theology, student activism, and the making of the new South Africa. I still think that lecture is very, very central to partly answering the question that you were asking. And I've always found Prof to be very innovative, and I think Sibulele was correct. He's not stale. He asks questions and provides answers as if he were you and me of this age, not accepting as fixed truths some of the things that they developed over the past couple of decades, but he constantly challenges his own ideas. So on those grounds, we bid you farewell, Prof, from exiting in public office. And I will make this point clearer later when I say you are probably exiting public office, but your life as a public servant is not about to end because you've been doing it for a much longer period. Thank you very much.
So we were quite liberal with time in this session, but I think it was worth it. And we are drawing towards the close of our event. Next is a presentation of a token of appreciation, and this will be done by the Walter Sisulu Chancellor, Dr. Nonkululeko Gobodo, in conjunction with the Walter Sisulu Chairperson of Council, Professor Tembeka Ngokaito. I sometimes get the intonation wrong. I really apologize. Tembeka Ngokaito. Thank you. No, it's just. Yes, so the VC as well is part of this. Prof, I got thrown off by my terrible pronunciation.
Kukumbele lo mcimbi ngokunikeza ke lento kuthiwa i-token ngesixhosa ke ngokuba sisipho bakhona abangasivayo isixhosa iyawuxelela lo usecaleni kwakho ukuthi andiva nabaqhubeka ntoni.
Hayi ibinkulu le mini bethuna ibinkulu ibinkulu le mini sizo honorisha umuntu omkhulu kangaka osenzele kangaka. I mean nesisipho I don't even think singafikelela kwinhliziyo zethu about you and the work that you've done. Ziyaxoka ke uba inoba yintoni nale. And I hope, Prof, you will receive it from the good hearts where it comes from. Thank you so much.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is where it is difficult to be humble. The student who did this is in my faculty. So he's a graduate of our Faculty of Law, Humanities and Social Sciences. No, he's a graduate. He was a former student, yes, he's a graduate. And his name, I should tell you his name, it's proper that we should. His name is Wongaletu Makliniva. And I might have not said that properly, but Makliniva. So that is Wongaletu Makliniva. That is his name.
Please, can we wait for
kuthiwa abantu hayi bendiza kuthiwa kukho into endingekayithethi apha nam ke ndisothukile uba into endingayithethi sisakhangela ke i-honorary recipient ye-doctorate ka-April 2027 asikayifumani kodwa ke ndiyakroka uba ingathi singayifumana apha namhlanje. Iprocedure ke ithi xa unomntu ombonileyo oqondayo uba uyayideserva i-honorary yasewusu okanye e-IWS okanye i-University Walter Sisulu ngamagama ethu onke ke lawo, xa uqonda uba ukhona umntu nokwana ombonayo uba uselungelweni mhlawumbi lo mntu lowo usandophuma kwa-National Lotteries dibana noregistrar wethu into ekuthiwa nguNtonzima uGaba unike elo gama. Mna ke njengosihlalo webhunga ndawubona uba ndithini.
May I now request the Vice-Chancellor to please hand over a token of appreciation to the Archbishop as our guest speaker. We are almost done, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience. There is one item left, which is for the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Professor Linnington, to make some announcements, do a closure, and give us a vote of thanks. But before she comes, I was given these few to also announce. The first one is to ask Prof. Pityana and his wife, and Professor Wiseman Kuhlu and Mansika, to get ready for a group photo. And then I was also asked to announce that Inkosi Makinana no Prince Chibi bacelwa to do a 1-minute video recording in tribute to Prof. Pityana. So please do not disappear soon after this. Thank you. Prof. Linnington.
Thank you. I also suffer from the height issue. Thank you so much. Humanity comes in all sizes. Thank you, Program Director Prof.N.Barney. I'm also going to stand on the protocol of others, and I hope that protocol doesn't feel trampled yet. But I do need to acknowledge a few people in thanks. Deputy Minister, Mr. Godlimpi, the Honourable MEC of Sport, Recreation, Arts, Culture, the Honourable MEC Ngongo, the Catholic Archbishop of Cape Town and President of South African Council of Churches, Your Grace, Archbishop Sipuka, Prof. Pityana, Mrs. Pityana, the incoming Chair of the Board, Mr. Bonakela, the Commissioner, Ms. Scholz, and the Board Member, Ms. Ferguson. Our Chancellor, Dr. Gabordo, the Chair of Council, Prof. Kaitobi. I can do that part, but it's the two together that get me. And I do practice it as well. Vice Chancellor Principal Professor Mgwebi, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, students, people online, Mweni. I'm truly honored and humbled to deliver the vote of thanks. And as we come to the close of this remarkable afternoon, it's my privilege to offer our sincere appreciation to everyone who has contributed to making this public lecture such a meaningful event. It's been more than an academic gathering. It's been a celebration of ideas, of leadership, and of life dedicated to justice, dignity, and ethical governance, and to the advance of humanity. The theme of today's lecture has challenged each of us to reflect on our moral foundations, as well as the role we play in building a more just and inclusive society. To the Archbishop, thank you for delivering a thought-provoking lecture that has used the four threads to inspire us to think deeply about our own lives and leadership, and to strive for leadership grounded in values, and to strive for leadership, values, compassion, and service. Your words have reminded us that lasting transformation begins with moral courage and an unwavering commitment to the common good, and probably ends with moral courage. Professor Pityana, 15 years ago, I was honored to deliver a message of thanks on behalf of Senate at UNISA on your retirement. And I'm very happy to do that again today. It is an absolute privilege to thank someone twice for being such a moral guiding light. 15 years ago, and I found the speech, 15 years ago, I thanked you for being the guide in terms of what it means to be a servant leader. And I think today we've spoken about that again. Since I met you in 2002, you've enriched my life and guided my leadership approach. Today, we have celebrated not only your extraordinary achievements, but also the principles that have guided your life's work. You've demonstrated that scholarship without conscience is incomplete, and that leadership finds its higher purpose in serving others. On behalf of University Water Sisulu, we thank you for your enduring contribution to higher education, to constitutional democracy, human rights, and nation building. Your legacy and your example of what it means to be a servant leader will continue to inspire and guide generations of scholarships and leaders. In all the times that we had more heated discussions than academic discussions on matters, like during the merger on some of the academic principles, you always played the issue and never the person. And I think those academic discussions that might have been a bit heated actually cemented our friendship rather than broke it apart. And I want to thank you for teaching me that disagreement is not a cause for making enemies, but a cause for bringing people together. Our heartfelt thanks also go to the National Lotteries Commission for partnering with us in hosting this important occasion. Partnerships such as these strengthen our shared commitment and community development and create opportunities that improve our lives. I know Mr. Bonakela will continue this great work. Our heartfelt thanks also go to our Vice-Chancellor and Principal, Prof.N.Barney, the Chancellor and Chairperson of Council, the Executive Management and all the other distinguished government leaders, honoured guests, colleagues from across the higher education sector, members of the media, students, those online, who joined us in this session. Your participation and the words of insight that those who spoke have shared with us has enriched the celebration and affirmed the importance of dialogue between universities, governments, civil society, and communities. A special word of thanks goes to the program director, the communication and marketing directors of both organizations, our protocol officers, organizers, technical teams, security personnel, the cleaners, the catering, and every member of both the University and National Lotteries Commission whose careful planning and dedication ensured today's success. Many hours of work of planning go into these things, and we wish to thank you sincerely. Today's lecture reminds us that in order to experience freedom, we need to live freedom. And I want to thank Prof. Pityana for that. And that our state of freedom is something that we choose and we develop. And it reminds us also that universities have a profound responsibility to shape ethical leaders, those that can think critically and think systematically, to advance social justice and to unlock the potential that exists in every person and every community within South Africa. Allow me to conclude with an African proverb. One who eats alone cannot discuss the taste of the food with others. Thank you for your participation. For those who want to know, I collect these things. And this, if I remember rightly, this one comes from Ghana. So one who eats alone cannot discuss the taste of food with others. So I think that tells us that together we can change, and alone we don't actually do much. Thank you for your participation and engagement. See you, Bolela. We wish everyone safe travels. I didn't have any announcements that I was aware of, so if I've missed the announcements, my apologies. Thank you, Nkosi Kakulu, and good afternoon.
Yeah, I've been reminded I'm standing between you and what is more pleasant later this evening, so I'll make it short. The announcements just keep pouring. Anyway, for the photo shoot, these are the participants. I've been told to make it clear. The Deputy Minister, the MEC, this is a group photo. Executive Mayor Representative, I may not mention the names, please pardon that. The Chief and the Prince, then the VC, the NLC Commissioner, the DVCs who are here, the Council of WS, then the NLC Board. Is there anyone I've forgotten? And those that were mentioned before. Otherwise, it's been lovely. I enjoyed myself. At some point, it didn't seem to be going well with the pronunciation, but thank you for your patience. Prof. Pityana's family is also required to be part of the photo shoot, including the Archbishop. So the photo shoot will take place here, I'm told. So we are not going anywhere, it will happen here.